This is Sports Bash Saturday with Josh Hennig, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Now, Sports Bash Saturday. Here's Josh Hennig.
Another edition of Sports Bash Saturday here on 97.3 ESPN. College football getting underway. Big NFL news popping off just minutes ago. Pac-12 releases their schedule this morning. So we got a lot to get to right here. Sports Bash Saturday, 97.3 ESPN. Busy show coming up. About 20 minutes from now, we'll be joined by DraftKings NFL analyst Reid Fowler. We got a lot to get to with him today because the NFL news that happened today, a lot of you are going to be making some different bets, different picks, different moves heading into tomorrow's Sunday games. Plus, another college football Saturday, another great guest for the second straight day. Former Heisman Trophy winner, former Florida State quarterback, former New York Knicks point guard, Charlie Ward will join us. He's the co-host of the Bleav in the ACC podcast. He'll join us coming up at 1:20 p.m. PlaySugarHouse.com. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. Got a lot of Eagles to get to. We'll get to all the Eagles and the injuries and how it's going to impact the game tomorrow. Also, we'll keep you apprised of what's going on in the college football world as a lot of teams are just getting ready to kick off. But before we get to anything else, I don't want to overlook the big news in the NFL. Cam Newton has just tested positive for COVID-19. The Patriots-Chiefs game will not be played on Sunday. It'll be moved to Monday or Tuesday. This is because also the practice squad quarterback, Jordan Ta'amu, tested positive for COVID-19. So the Chiefs and the Patriots both have a player each tested positive. Now, as of this moment, according to Adam Schefter of ESPN, no one else has tested positive for the Patriots, but they're testing and retesting, and the NFL is having the Patriots and the Chiefs go through the same procedure as A.J. Terrell from last week. Those who may or may not know, the Falcons had a positive COVID-19 test last weekend. A.J. Terrell, one of their cornerbacks, got put on the reserve list. Nobody else on the Falcons, though, tested positive. So as long as the tests keep coming back negative on the point of contact tests as well as the rapid tests for the Patriots and Chiefs, they will play either Monday or Tuesday. So that's the news as of this moment. Chiefs practice squad quarterback Jordan Ta'amu, as well as the Patriots starting quarterback Cam Newton, have both tested positive for COVID-19. So what that means is that the game will not be played tomorrow. The NFL has already come out with an announcement saying that they are rescheduling the game for Monday or Tuesday as long as both teams come back with enough negative, clear tests for them to play. Because as long as there's no spread like with the Titans, then you can continue to play tomorrow. Again, they're following the same procedure the Falcons went through last week. So think about the Falcons last week, they played a game. Okay? They played a game despite having a positive test. So it didn't totally derail the game. Now, part of the issue with the reason why this game is being postponed, now Adam Schefter literally just tweeted 44 seconds ago, it's sounding more like Tuesday night football than Monday night football. Part of the problem with this, and I just want to kind of elaborate everybody, is just so everybody knows, part of the concern isn't just COVID related, it's logistics related. Remember, the Patriots still have to fly to Kansas City. Their flight was supposed to leave after 1 o'clock today. That flight now has been put on hold until whenever they get all this clear. And it does take time for these point of contact tests as well as the rapid tests, as well as all the other tests and the procedures they're going to go through for them to actually turn this around. So this is not just a COVID issue. This is also a logistics issue. There's a possibility that you may not have all the tests and be in the clear until later tonight. So if that's the case, the Patriots might not even leave until tomorrow. And if that's the situation, then you might not play till Monday or Tuesday. So that's part of the reason why the game is being shuffled the way it is. Now, the other news that came out this morning that's more of a positive reassurance in the NFL was there have been no Minnesota Vikings to test positive for COVID-19, even though we are now up to 8 players and 8 personnel for the Titans who have tested positive for COVID. There are no Vikings players. So this kind of gets back to some of the things that we've noticed around sports before the NFL started their season, that just because a person on one team gets it doesn't mean them playing against somebody else is going to pass along the virus. The virus isn't transmitted through traditional contact like it is, like other infectious diseases are. Since it's an airborne virus, it's transmitted differently than maybe like the cold, the flu, or things like that. So, no Minnesota Vikings. They're all in the clear. So they're going to be able to play this weekend. We know that the Titans, their situation is a little bit in limbo because they need to have a certain number of days with no positive tests in order for the NFL and their advisors to be in the clear for them to play next weekend. So that's basically the rundown as of right now. If we get more news and information, I will let you know as soon as I know. I'm not gonna sound the alarm and panic or anything like that. But I just want to keep you updated, let you know what's going on. Again, the New England-Kansas City game, according to Adam Schefter, is most likely to be played on Tuesday due to them going through all the procedures with the positive testing, with clearing everybody, also with travel. Because, again, as I said, the Patriots still have to travel to Kansas City. Remember, last weekend, it was only A.J. Terrell, the cornerback of the Falcons, tested positive. The Falcons didn't have to go anywhere. They could just stay in their own market. So there was no travel issues with the logistics as well. So don't overlook the logistical side of this issue as well with these delays. So as long as everybody's in the clear, Patriots, Chiefs, minus Cam Newton, will be played, according to Adam Schefter, on Tuesday night. Also, according to Adam Schefter early this morning, the Vikings are still having 0 positive tests, so they are good to go for their game. Also, on top of all of this, let's also note that the Titans now have 8 players, 8 coaches, positive tests. If they don't stop the number of positives soon, their next game for the Titans might be in jeopardy as well, because you can play even if people are on the reserve list. But the problem is the Titans need a certain number of days with no more positives in a row before the NFL will let them play. So a lot of COVID issues to kind of update you on here at the top of the hour, all popping off. And what does all this mean? For those of you playing fantasy, for those of you who are putting in sports bets this weekend, we'll get into all that and more coming up with Reid Fowler from DraftKings, NFL Analyst, joining us coming up about 11 minutes from now. PlaySugarHouse.com text board is open, 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. If you didn't see the news yesterday for the Philadelphia Eagles, they have a bunch of guys on the injury list. Obviously, none of them are COVID-related. These are all traditional football injuries. So what you're talking about is 2 wide receivers have been ruled out for Sunday. 2 cornerbacks have been ruled out for Sunday. Just to give you a little bit of the rundown of exactly who and what. And all the details are out right now at 973ESPN.com. We posted the article yesterday when the news came down. You have no Deshaun Jackson, no Alshon Jeffrey. They're both out. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside is listed as doubtful. So the likelihood right now is you're going to see Greg Ward, Deontay Burnett, Travis Fulgham, Hakeem Butler, Zach Ertz playing at the receiver positions tomorrow night for the Philadelphia Eagles on Sunday Night Football. Also ruled, I mentioned cornerbacks. You have Trevor Williams, who is one of your primary backups right now, along with Avonte Maddox, is not going to play either. So Avonte's out. He's your starting corner. His backup, Trevor Williams, is out. The backup originally was Craig James. He's not playing for 3 weeks. So it looks like your cornerbacks for Sunday, as of right now, are going to be Nikel Roby-Coleman in the slot, Darius Slay, and then Cre'Von LeBlanc. Now, I will be very interested to see, do they play LeBlanc in the slot or do they put Nikel Roby-Coleman back on the outside? Because he did get a couple snaps on the outside last week versus the Bengals, and he didn't look so good. Now, he's had a rough year so far overall anyway, so I have to wonder, who do they feel more comfortable with playing on the outside? Is it LeBlanc or is it Roby-Coleman? Very curious to find out what the Eagles do tomorrow night. Don't forget, Jalen Mills, who's playing safety, has experience at corner. Do they try to run some schemes and some formations that make Jalen Mills maybe like do a little more man coverage and zone coverage out there, considering the fact that the 49ers do like to run a lot of misdirection. They like to run a lot of 3-4 wide receiver sets. Speaking of the 49ers, they have their own cluster of injuries. Jimmy Garoppolo, Raheem Mostert, Jordan Reed, D. Ford, Emmanuel Mosley, D. Crinlaw, and Ahkello Witherspoon all ruled out. Kwan Williams, he is questionable. So that's your starting quarterback, your starting running back, your starting tight, your backup tight end, your best pass rusher in D. Ford. You have 2 cornerbacks missing for the 49ers and a linebacker. Don't forget, Nick Bosa's out for the year with a torn-up knee. He's done for the year. Solomon Thomas was injured also a couple weeks ago. He's on the defensive line. So the 49ers are also going to be missing a bunch of players on defense. And as I just told Billy Schweim about 20 minutes ago on the locker room, this might be the last chance the Eagles have to win a game for a while. And I'm not trying to be a doom and gloom kind of guy. I'm just keeping it 100% honest with you. Because when you look at the Eagles' schedule, this schedule was originally looking that they could be going into the next stretch of games something like, 2-1, maybe like 3-1, 2-2. Because you looked at the Washington game, you looked at the Bengals game, and they looked like wins. The Rams, you weren't fully sure, but you thought maybe they can win because they're at home. And this 49ers game, a lot of people would have chalked up to being a loss on the schedule because they have the 49ers on Sunday night. Next week, they have the Steelers. The week after that, they have the Ravens. That is a tough 3-game stretch. And then right after that, you have the Giants, the Cowboys, the Giants again. There's a possibility that the Eagles will only have 2 more chances for legitimate wins by the end of this month going into next month. They need to win this game. I'm not trying to call it a must-win game, but it's certainly important. It's important in the grand scheme of things to make sure that they get this win against a banged-up, beat-up, very injured defensive front and secondary for the 49ers. They are just as, if not more, banged up than you are right now. You got to take advantage of it. You got to insert your will. And I know everyone's down on this team right now. They're 0-2-1. I get it. But if they were ever going to win a game, this has to be the game. Because I personally don't see them beating the Steelers. Steelers are going to have 13 days off before they play the Eagles. They're basically coming off of a built-in bye week because of the whole situation with Tennessee and Minnesota. So I don't think you're beating the Steelers after an unexpected bye, and they're mostly healthy anyway. And then you have the Ravens after that. That's arguably the second best team in the AFC. And if the Eagles aren't any more healthy by the time they play the Ravens, I don't see them beating the Ravens, not even one bit. So then your next chance to win a game is the Giants. So if you don't beat the 49ers tomorrow night, in my mind, you're going to be 0-5-1 going into the Giants game on October 22nd. No bueno, senor. Totally bad. Not going to work. I don't care what they got to do tomorrow. I don't care if they need to pull out the triple option. I don't care if they have to go Army-Navy football on 49ers and run the triple option. I don't care if they got to run 20 misdirections. I don't care if they got to pull out plays that we've never seen before from Doug Peterson. I don't care if you run Philly on back-to-back plays. I don't care what you got to do. Doug Peterson, Carson Wentz, and the Eagles offense, I got to put up or shut up. I'm tired of hearing about how Carson Wentz is regressed. I'm tired of hearing about how he's in a slump. I'm tired of hearing about Doug Peterson saying, I got to do a better job. This is the moment that you earn your money. Because you are one of the worst offenses in the NFL right now. Your defense held a very talented rookie quarterback to 23 points after hitting him 18 times in the pocket last week. You hit him so hard one time, you got penalized for it. The defense did everything in their power to keep you in that game. But the offense didn't get the job done for another week. This is now multiple weeks now, 3 straight weeks, that you can't score points. It's embarrassing. You scored 17 versus Washington, 19 versus the Rams, and last week 23? No, that's unacceptable. You look around the NFL. You look around and see what teams are doing. Did you watch the Broncos-Jets game last night? Because if you did, that probably made you even more mad. Because I'm watching a third-string quarterback, Brett Rippon, and Sam Darnold put up over 30 points each on offense. They were getting the job done. How is it that the Broncos can score in the 30-point range and the Philadelphia Eagles can't? I think most people would take Carson Wentz over Brett Rippon. I think most people would take the Eagles' offensive line, even though it is banged up, over the Broncos' offensive line. I think most people would take the Eagles' banged-up receivers over the no-names that the Broncos have outside of Jerry Jeudy. He's the only real legitimate good wide receiver they have. The Broncos' defense is playing without Von Miller. So what's the Eagles' excuse? Why can't they win a game? The Philadelphia Eagles are averaging 19.7 points per game. That is currently 5th worst in the NFL. They score less points per game than the Broncos, who I just mentioned. They score less points per game than the Bengals, who they just played. They score less points per game than Teddy Bridgewater and the Panthers, less points per game than Gardner Minshew and the Jags. They score less points per game than Fitzmagic and the Dolphins, less points per game than Matthew Stafford and the Lions. The Bears are going to go with Nick Foles moving forward because that's how bad Mitch Trubisky, how inconsistent he's been. The inconsistent Bears are averaging 24.7 points per game. Philadelphia Eagles are scoring 5 less points per game than an inconsistent, messy Bears team. 609-403-0973, the PlaySugarHouse.com text board. We'll talk more NFL coming up next with DraftKings NFL analyst Reid Fowler here on Sports Bash Saturday on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app.
This is Sports Bash Saturday with Josh Hennig, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Here's Josh Hennig.
PlaySugarHouse.com text board is open. We'll get to it in just a little bit later in the hour. 609-403-0973. Of course, Sports Bash Saturday being brought to you by GMS Law. Make the right call. With 4 convenient locations to serve you, visit them online at gmslaw.com. NFL news coming fast and heavy. Of course, how is that going to impact your weekend? Well, DraftKings and the Philadelphia Eagles announced a multi-year deal today, a couple days ago, that will make DraftKings the official daily fantasy sports partner and the official sports betting partner of the Philadelphia Eagles. So to join us to talk more NFL right now, Reid Fowler, DraftKings NFL analyst, also golfing guru, joins us right now on the Boardwalk kind of hotline here on Sports Bash Saturday on 97.3 ESPN. Reid, how's your head spinning after he's slowing down a little bit there?
Yeah, it's like the top that Leo DiCaprio spun in Inception. I feel like I have to come back down to reality. I have to know what the dream state or the nightmare state in this case is and what's reality. But man, it's like we were talking about earlier. The news is coming fast and heavy, and we just gotta make changes. We kind of knew this, right? This was always the undertone, the undercurrent of the NFL season, that at some point this had the opportunity, the good chance of happening. So how do we adjust?
So part of that adjustment for a lot of people right now is with the Patriots-Chiefs game getting shuffled. Right now it looks like if everything goes as we hope, it would be played on Tuesday night. So, in terms of whether someone jumping on the DraftKings Sportsbook app or jumping on DFS or someone who's playing a year-long fantasy, what is your advice off the top to those people?
Yeah, I think you have to take it with the worst case scenario, right? Whether it be from a betting angle, right? That doesn't really, because I Bleav that that's the case, other precautions or other stipulations have taken place. But we're talking about DFS, and this is what I said too at the Tennessee-Pittsburgh game, is you kind of have to treat it as a mid to late week injury report, right? The salaries don't change with news coming in and out. On DFS. And so you treat it in a way that, well, if you made a lot of lineups with Cam Newton in it, because I do think he was in a good matchup here against the Kansas City Chiefs, who were not great at defending the run, just the run in general this season. And last season, I thought Cam Newton was in a good spot. You just have to adjust, right? You have to do that in season long, especially at quarterback. If you don't play in a super flex or a 2 QB league, there's starting quarterbacks that should be on your waiver wire. You look at Ryan Fitzpatrick, Gardner Minshew, Matt Stafford, who are all in good spots. I think you can adjust that way. And if hopefully your commissioner set up IR spots or spots that if someone did test positive for COVID, that you could put that person in that roster spot and then not lose, have to drop someone in order to pick up a Gardner Minshew, which would be a little bit tough to do if you're building your team for depth. So there are certain things that you would have to do, but from a DraftKings standpoint, I take it in the same way as if we get a late scratch or a late injury report like a Joe Mixon, like we got right earlier. I thought Joe Mixon's questionable tag early this morning was going to be the news that was going to be the toughest to bear, but man, it's spiraled from there.
Now, on the flip side, how do you handle a team maybe coming out of this? Like, for example, let's say the Titans are all good to go next week. We know the Steelers, they're going to have 13 days off. Now, Tomlin says we don't care, right? But you know what? That's Tomlin. That's not the guy that's going on the field. So from an analysis of the players, Ben Roethlisberger having a great year. James Conner, I know he's owned in, I think it's 98%. He's rostered in 98% of ESPN Fantasy Football League. So, what do you do with guys from the Titans and the Steelers going into next week who are coming off of all this downtime?
Yeah, that comes down to, I think, coaching, right? That's kind of what I said earlier in the season and the preseason, right? Quote unquote. I'll just call it the off season, right? Because we didn't have a preseason. But
what's a preseason? Really I don't even know what that is anymore.
Yeah, I know exactly. You really want to hone in on the organization, right, and the coaching staffs. If there is a silver lining to these teams, right? You have the Titans, the Steelers, the Chiefs, and the Patriots. You look at those four organizations, and you would argue that those are in the top 5 or 6 organizations in the NFL and how they're coached and how they're managed, right? They have their teams always ready to play no matter what. And so when you look at that, you think, there's going to be some things where you have to figure out, right? And the players are going to be a little skeptic. Maybe they're a little timid of what they should and shouldn't be doing. But that's up to the coaching staff. And that's why you pay these guys the big bucks, is because when what hits the fan, who are the guys that are going to rise above what's happening right now? This is out of our control. Like it's like the things that like in terms of the virus and how it spreads, sure, we can practice social distancing and we can practice all the precautions that the CDC tells us and all the things that we should be doing. But at the same time, trying to to make sure 50 to 100 staff members follow every single protocol is very, very tough. You have to rely on management. You have to rely on being safe and sound first and foremost. But I would argue that those 4 organizations, I would feel confident that moving forward, they have their guys ready to play.
Reid Fowler joining us here on the Boardwalk kind of hotline, DraftKings NFL analyst here on 97.3 ESPN. Follow him on Twitter at Reid T. Fowler for all your NFL, as well as golf betting and fantasy advice. Reid, a little news just popped off. I want to get your thoughts on it. The Eagles are placing Jason Peters on injured reserve, and that's big news in our area because the Eagles already have about 200 injuries on their team. So, considering the Eagles' offense already can't score any more than 23 points in a game so far this year, how do you handle an Eagles team that the only receiver on the 53-man roster who actually got playing time in practice week was Greg Ward?
Oh, yeah, Greg Ward, wide receiver 1 for the Philadelphia Eagles. Like, if we didn't know that coming into the season, then what are we doing as analysts? No, first and foremost, Philly fans, you guys are some of the most passionate football fans, right? So, like, when in the partnership that we have with you guys, I think it was a no-brainer, right? Like, it's partnering with the Philadelphia Eagles or any Philadelphia team, and congratulations too on getting Doc Rivers into the city. That should be fun as well. There's a lot to, I guess if we're talking about this in a vacuum, there is a silver lining to everything, and partnering with you guys and DraftKings partnering with the Philadelphia Eagles is so much fun. There's a million different things that we can talk about on the positive side, but let's get to what you were saying about Jason Peters and the injuries that are just the laundry list of injuries, right? That now the Eagles have to face. The one thing that I will say, and I remember talking with you in the offseason and maybe last season as well, is that Carson Wentz, the talent is there, right? We know that the talent is there with Carson Wentz. It's just his decision-making hasn't been the best for the last couple of years. And the reason why I say that is if you look at the offensive line, and specifically, right, that's kind of what you go to when you look at Carson Wentz. He's got 6 interceptions, only 3 touchdowns. We know that he gets hurried and pressured a ton. But in terms of the offensive line, and in Miles Sanders' case, he's getting 1.4 yards before contact, which is right around league average. So I would argue that of all of the injuries to the offensive line, that one hurts the most. Because when you have the other players like Dallas Goedert going out, Alshon Jeffrey still rolled out, Deshaun Jackson not going to be able to play. Miles Sanders, Carson Wentz, and some of these other players, they were fine. It was just the decision making from Carson Wentz that you had to kind of scratch your head and say, man, what are you doing? Some of the plays that you're making are just not the right calls. The throws that you're trying to make just aren't the right reads. And so this one's going to hurt the most, in my opinion. Sure, you want all your receivers out there. Dallas Goedert was looking like he was becoming a breakout tight end. Maybe with Zach Ertz and the whole contract dispute, it kind of made you feel a little bit better as a Philly fan that you had Dallas Goedert in the building. But this one's going to be big because the offensive line, you can't lose that. Miles Sanders is your go-to guy this season.
Now, with that all being said, though, as I mentioned earlier, this team can't score points. I saw Brett Rippon in the Broncos put up 30-plus points. So, can I really trust Carson Wentz, Doug Peterson, the Eagles right now? Because, for a team with a second overall pick and an offensive-minded head coach, they seem to be doing as well as maybe me out there calling the plays.
Yeah, that's what's scary too, right? Is, the implied team total is 18.5 points against a 49ers team that you could argue had, a pretty big list of injuries to the defensive front and to their defensive unit, which is their calling card, right? Nick Bosa, Richard Sherman out. D Ford may be back in this game, but they lost Solomon Thomas as well, and then DeForest Buckner, obviously, with the Colts. But yet, only 18.5 points against this team is a little alarming, like you're mentioning. So yeah, I'm pretty scared. If I were looking at this game specifically to bet, I would just say, Philly fans, you might want to stay away from this one, even if you're getting 7.5 points right now on the DK Sportsbook on the road. Like that, it's a scary, like you're mentioning here. Like I would argue we've seen overs hit in so many cases, right, in the first couple of weeks because the defenses just haven't been up to snuff. The continuity on defense, I think, was always going to be tough to handle without a preseason. But we're probably going to see a lot of unders this week. And I think the Philly, San Francisco, if I'm looking at it from a betting angle, that under 46 is probably where I'm leaning.
Oh, absolutely, especially considering the fact that the 49ers, they're also without their starting quarterback. Mostert was ruled out. Yep. People forget that Nick Bosa's out for the year. They have injuries on their defensive side, too. So you have an offense that can't score, another team that's without their starting quarterback. Their own defense has a bunch of injuries. This is probably going to be like a 17-14, 2016 game anyway.
Yeah. Well, harken back to the days, right, where it's the 9-6. Maybe it's a baseball because, we're in the playoffs. Maybe it's, it's a little baseball score that we get here. But, yeah, I just when you look at just the landscape, especially from that game, too, right, like you mentioned, Greg Ward is your go-to guy. Hey, Zach Ertz might get 35 targets in this game. Like, who else are you going to throw to? Like you're mentioning, Greg Ward is fine from, like a target share percentage. But again, you always have to look at the value of those targets. If Carson Wentz can't get you the ball in the right spots, if the defense is saying, hey, all we have to do is double up on Ertz, maybe we load the box against Miles Sanders, then we're going to force the Eagles to beat us with Greg Ward. That seems like a pretty good defensive plan from Shanahan and the 49ers. So when you look at that, this one's a pretty scary. You want to get those guys back for the Eagles as fast as possible, or you got to start thinking about making changes, right? And at this point, at this juncture of the season, only 4 weeks in, you're not going to want to, that doesn't want to be the second priority on your to-do list this early in the season.
Reid Fowler joining us here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline on Sports Bash Saturday on 97.3 ESPN. Again, follow on Twitter at Reid T. Fowler. Couple more for you, Reid, before I let you go. The Eagles are in the NFC East, which means it's probably the NFC least right now. The Dallas Cowboys also can't stop basically you and me running routes. So, the Cowboys, they have a win on the year. So, that's a positive, right?
Yeah. Washington football team right now, 1-2 is tied for first there. And the Giants, they again, right, this division too has been riddled with injuries. You saw Terry McLaurin for Washington come up on that injury report midweek. You never want to see that, right? And then that's the good and bad of the NFC East is that you're never really out of it, right? Philly, like tying that game against Cincinnati, as much as I love Philly fans, like no one deserved to win that game the way that game was being played. And so when you look at now the next handful of weeks, like you mentioned, Dallas can't stop anyone. So it just becomes a shootout. And that offense has been fantastic. So you like to see that. But at the same time, if you're Philly, this is the part of the season that you really have to make your move, right? You got the 49ers, the Steelers, the Ravens. That is a tough 3-week stretch. And so if you can come away with a road win against the 49ers here, find a way to win this game, that's going to give you a little bit more confidence going into those next 2 weeks, because then you go Giants, Cowboys, a couple of division games there for weeks 7 and 8 before you get to that bye, and then you come back with the Giants. I think if you can get 1, 2 for the next 3 or 4, you're going to feel pretty good, especially with all the injuries. Hopefully we get Dallas Goedert back after that week 9 bye, and then some guys that are on the injury report get healthy again. And then that last stretch there, right? You got Cleveland, Seattle, Green Bay, New Orleans. Maybe you can eke out some wins the same way we did last season and get to the playoffs. And we got one extra playoff spot too.
That's true. The one extra playoff spot to come up big because if a 500 team wins the NFC East, at least it'll keep somebody else maybe like in the Central or the West in the NFC allowed to get in. Before I let you go, Reid, I got to ask you, if the Chiefs are the best team in the AFC and the Ravens are number 2, who's the third best team in the AFC?
Yeah. Buffalo right now is playing out of their mind, right? Like the Chiefs clearly number 1. You can say the Ravens, they met a very, very well-coached, well-schemed, and extremely good defensive scheme against Lamar Jackson with the Chiefs there. But I think you got to give it to the Bills here. Josh Allen is playing great. You look at that defense, they get their linebackers back, which I think was huge for them with Matt Milano and Edmonds there. But I think you got to give it to the Bills right now, just because of the way they're playing, the way the efficiency that offense in terms of Josh Allen. I mean, passer rating, passing offense is one of the tops in the league. That's what you need. So, in this NFL landscape in 2020. So I would give it to the Bills, but, a lot can happen. Tennessee is right there, too. They're undefeated at 3-0. But I'll give it to the Bills because I'm still a little bit worried with the Steelers and how Ben Roethlisberger and his health is going to go, because we saw without Big Ben what this Steelers team is. Even with a solid defense, they're just an 8-8 team at best. So give me the Bills.
He's Reid Fowler, DraftKings NFL analyst, also golf guru as well. Check out all of his analysis and perspectives on the NFL and the PGA Tour on his Twitter feed at Reid T. Fowler. And also I'm part of DraftKings. DraftKings now the official sportsbook and fantasy sports partner of the Philadelphia Eagles. Reid, appreciate the time on a Saturday, and we'll keep our fingers crossed about the rest of the weekend, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Josh, for having me.
Josh Hennig here, Sports Bash Saturday on 97.3 ESPN. We'll get to your text board messages coming up. 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea City.
This is Sports Bash Saturday with Josh Hennig, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Here's Josh Hennig.
Sports Bash Saturday being brought to you by GMS Law. Make the right call with 4 convenient locations to serve you. Visit them online at gmslaw.com. 609-403-0973 to the PlaySugarHouse.com text board. We got some texts to get to. Before we get to that, just want to bring you up to date on a little bit more news. So as we mentioned during the news came out right when Reid and I were on the air, Reid Fowler from DraftKings, Jason Peters has been placed on injured reserve, which means he'll miss the next 3 games with what's being termed a toe injury. Now, remember, this is the same guy who there was fatigue, there was a cramp, he had illness this week, and now he has a toe injury? I mean, what the heck is going on with Jason Peters? I don't know what's more ridiculous. I really don't. I don't know what's more ridiculous anymore. Is the fact that Jason Peters has now technically had 4 different injuries on the report in a week, and now he's on IR with something completely different? Or is it that we might see Chiefs versus Patriots on Tuesday Night Football? I don't know what's more ridiculous anymore. I really don't. What is going on with this guy? I understand he's 38 years old. I'm 35, for goodness sake. This guy's falling apart more than I am. And he's a professional athlete. I mean, look, illness, okay, you got a stomach bug or something like that. Okay, things happen, right? Okay, you got a cramp. Things happen, right? Fatigue, all right. There was no real off season. There were no preseason games, all right. But how do you go from all of that to now a toe injury that keeps him out for the next 3 weeks minimum? I feel like I missed the memo on this guy. What is going on with Jason Peters? And this is the guy who insisted that you give all this extra money for him to go move to left tackle? I don't get it. Also, the NFL is already making some schedule adjustments for Sunday, with the Patriots-Chiefs game no longer being played as the primary CBS game at 4:15. The NFL now has moved the Colts-Bears game from 4:15 to 4:15 instead of 1 p.m. Eastern. So they will fill that slot in the schedule. Now, I am curious to find out, is that now going to be a CBS game? Because the Patriots-Chiefs game is no longer the primary CBS game. I'm genuinely curious. I want to know what happens to the CBS major game, because that was supposed to be a Jim Nance, Tony Romo game, right? So what happens to Nance and Romo? Do they move them to a different game? Do they stay on the Patriots-Chiefs game and they just hang out till Tuesday night? I genuinely want to know. Also, on a college football front, there's another penalty in the Texas game. They now have, if I'm counting correctly, 12 penalties in the game. The 9 of the first 10 plays of the game had penalties. I mean, that's just a dumb penalty. I mean, he literally grabbed the guy's face mask. The offensive lineman didn't just hold him. He grabbed his face mask to keep him from getting away. There, let me double check exactly how many penalties we're up to now. It was literally first 9 of 10 plays. Remember I told you this game was going to hit the over? The only thing that's hitting the over now is on the number of penalties. If you had a bet on the number of penalties called in this game, you probably already hit the over on that. Let's see here. Penalties. Okay, they're at 11. Sorry, they're at 11 penalties. I said it was 12 or 13. It feels like 12 or 13. Well, I'm sorry. The reason why I thought it was more is because the penalty was rescinded on the Max Duggan touchdown run by TCU to give them the lead. So, yeah. So far, the TCU-Texas game, the only thing hitting the over on right now is over on the penalties. I mean, this game is ugly. Sam Ehlinger can't even complete a pass. I mean, this is ridiculous. Now he's chucking it down the sideline. The screen just froze. Hey, he caught the ball, but there's a flag on the play. Because of course there is. Oh, my goodness. I'm literally just waiting to see if this is offensive or defensive pass interference. Yeah, it's offensive. Plays negated. No pass completion. All right, let's get your text messages to playsugarhouse.com. Text board 609-403-0973. Texter says, to be honest, I forgot Alshon Jeffrey was even on the team. When was the last time he even played? That's $13 million of wasted cap space. The last time he played was, I believe, last December. December was when he had the surgery on his foot for the Liz Frank injury. The reason why he's on the roster is because the Eagles didn't want to put him on the long-term IR because then he'd have to miss a certain number of games. Now, they theoretically could have put him on the short-term IR and him just to miss the first 3 games, but for whatever reason, they wanted him on the active roster because they thought he'd be back sooner than he has been, but it seems like he's not 100% ready to come back. So we will have to see what happens with Alshon Jeffrey. But I get what you're saying. You guys on the roster. Listen, if Alshon Jeffrey was out there tomorrow night, I would feel a little better about the offense. By about maybe like 2% better. By the way, Texas just converted a 3rd and 25 on Sam Ehlinger's first pass completion of the game. Big 12 football. You got to love it. 609-403-0973, the playsugarhouse.com text board. Nick from Brigantine. Sorry, Dan from EHC, the next text. Nick from Brigantine chimes in and says, Josh, I love the Birds, but I'm not feeling it this year. The Eagles' points per game have been slowly going down since Frank Reich left. Well, it's more than Frank Reich. I think Frank Reich's part of it. Remember, it's not like Frank Reich has done an incredible job over there with the Colts either. He's now on his 3rd different quarterback in Indianapolis, right? He started with Andrew Luck, and then Andrew Luck got injured and retired. Then he had Jacoby Brissett last year. It's Phillip Rivers this year. Overall, when you look at their team right now, they were 10th in the NFL in points per game in 2018. They were 18th in 2019. So, I don't really know how much was Frank Reich. Maybe Frank Reich is the Carson Wentz whisperer. Maybe that's what it is. Even Frank Reich's team has gone down and went down points per game 2 consecutive years. He had 27 points per game with Andrew Luck. He had 22.6 next year. Now you can say, well, Andrew Luck's that good. I don't know. They had a lot of injuries last year too, though. So this year they're back at 2-1. They have a pretty good offense this year, but right now they're 13th in the NFL. So you're 13th in the NFL, 16th in the NFL, and 5th in the NFL. So I can't 100% say Nick and Brigantine it's 100% Frank Reich. I kind of feel like some of it's Frank Reich. I think some of it's just Carson, honestly. I think some of the problem with Wentz is, as I've said before, him being stubborn. Now, you could argue that maybe Frank Reich and John DeFilippo were able to get through to Wentz much better than Press Taylor and Mike Groh and Rick Scangarello and whoever else has been in Carson Wentz's ear over the last 3 years. I don't know also how much Doug Peterson is involved in the process of mentoring and working with Wentz. I don't know how hands-on he is. You know, a lot of times head coaches have a lot of responsibilities around the whole team. So I don't know, is Doug Peterson personally going through the video with Wentz even more than usual this week? Or is he leaving it still to Press Taylor and the other coaches? I don't know. But I get what you're saying. You know, Frank Reich leaving has definitely had an impact on this team. To me, it's the whole offense as a whole in terms of creativity. I think that there's something to be said for the fact that the Eagles' offense has gotten predictable and a little stale. Now we'll get to Dan from EHT. Sorry, Dan, 609-403-0973. He says, Wentz obviously is an accuracy problem. Down the field ball is terrible regardless of who the bad receivers are. It's like a basketball player that shoots bricks. He just doesn't have the touch. And I'm glad you texted it in, Dan from EHT, because we've heard from people wondering on the Sports Bash with Mike Gill and Hunter Brody about, is it like Chuck Knobloch? Does he just have the yips? Is there a mental block in Wentz's mind for why he's playing the way he is? I argue it's partially, I think it's two things. I think it's one, it's mechanics. Obviously, his footwork has been sloppy. His release point has been inconsistent. That's part of the reason why some of the throws have been so high and, you know, he's been inaccurate at times. But I think it's also just because he's been stubborn at times. I think that you go back and rewatch that interception, that second interception on Sunday versus the Bengals. He stared down Ertz the entire time. He never looked off the He never looked off the receiver. Excuse me. So what that means to me is that he's not going through the procedures of the offense. Every NFL level offense has first option, second option, third option, fourth option, right? It's on the quarterback to not just to get the ball out of his hands in under 2.5 seconds, but it's also on the quarterback to go through the rhythm of the offense, to scan the field, to go through his checkdowns, to figure out, all right, who's open, who's not. I know I want to go to Ertz, but I should at least look to my left. At least look over there. And I think that's the bigger problem, Dan from VHD. It's the fact that it's not just the shooting bricks, as you said, right? It's not just the missed throws, but it's the fact that he's stubborn and insists on making certain throws. I don't care how talented you are. You got to go through the process. You got to work in the confines of the offense. The question is Wentz going to learn his lesson? We'll find out tomorrow night. 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig.
This is South Jersey's radio home to the Eagles, Sixers, and Flyers. WENJ, WENJ HD, Millville, Atlantic City. 97.3 ESPN, South Jersey's sports leader.
This is Sports Bash Saturday with Josh Hennig, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Now, Sports Bash Saturday. Here's Josh Hennig.
Second hour of the show, Sports Bash Saturday, 97.3 ESPN. BlakeSugarHouse.com. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. Despite 12 penalties so far in the Texas-TCU game, we have a tie ball game. With 21 seconds left in the first quarter, 12 penalties and a 7-7 game. Isn't Big 12 football fun? Listen, I love college football. Let me tell you something. I don't know what the Big 12 deserves to be in the college football playoff anytime soon. I'll take UCF over any of these teams at this point. I mean, this is ridiculous. By the way, speaking of college football, coming up, Heisman Trophy winner, former Florida State quarterback, former New York Knicks point guard, Charlie Ward joins us from the Bleav on the ACC podcast. He'll be joining us coming up at 1:20 today. Talk some college football, what's going on in the ACC. Is Miami the number 2 team in the ACC? He knows Derek King. What does he think about the quarterback of Miami? We'll find out from Charlie Ward coming up about 18 minutes from now. Just to run it back on some of the NFL and Eagles news, if you didn't hear it, Jason Peters has been placed on the short-term injured reserve with a toe issue. MRIs resulted revealing the severity of the toe issue. He complained about discomfort in his foot and with the toe at Friday's practice after missing 2 practices with an illness. So Jason Peters down and out with an injury again. I don't know. I guess his body's just breaking down at this point. I mean, it's just amazing to me that the guy, I mean, he's had fatigue, he's had cramps, he's had hamstring, quad issues the last couple of years. He got an illness this week, probably some sort of like stomach bug from what, a lot of the speculation is by the people who cover the team. So, and now he's going to be out for a while. So I'm going to assume that the left tackle is either Jordan Mailata or Jack Driscoll. The Eagles haven't specifically said who's going to play yet. But we do know that Jason Peters, your starting left tackle, formerly your starting right guard, formerly a free agent before Brandon Brooks and Andre Dillard were injured. Well, now Jason Peters is out. And it's an interesting side note because he was listed as questionable on the injury report yesterday. Now, the good news is Jack Driscoll is back at practice. Now, we know Driscoll can play tackle. He played it in college. He played it for the Eagles in week 1. The only reason why he left that first game was because of some cramping and some issues there that ended up being okay. He ended up being all right. But we know he could play tackle. So do you go into the 49ers game, a 49ers team who's missing 3 of their defensive linemen, right? Do you go in there with the rookie at left tackle and then Layden Johnson at right? Or do you go with Jordan Mailata? Who do you trust more? Do you trust the guy who has started at tackle in the SEC and 1 game in the NFL? Or do you trust the guy who's the physical freak, who's never played a college football game in his life, and his only NFL experience was last week in the regular season? I don't really know what the right answer is because I just don't know. I don't know if there is a right answer to that question. It's certainly going to be interesting to find out exactly who plays in Jason Peters' place. So that's the latest on the Philadelphia Eagles front. And just to run it back on what's going on in the NFL as a whole. By the way, a little news to drop here. Les Bowen of the Philadelphia Inquirer is reporting that sources are telling him that the Eagles will play Jordan Mailata tomorrow at left tackle. So I guess it's the time to see if that draft pick, that late round draft pick, and all the couple of years of investment in Jordan Mailata are going to pay off. I personally would have gone with Jack Driscoll at left tackle, but apparently they're going to go with Mailata. So that's going to be interesting. Now, remember, Mailata is a physical freak, okay? Mailata is the guy who played rugby. The Eagles drafted him. They've groomed him. They've kind of trained him. They've really tried to work with him. He's a guy that I know people who are former offensive linemen who study the game of football, like Brian Baldinger, they think he has all the tools, right? They think he has all the tools to play tackle in the NFL based on the limited information we do have of seeing him in preseason and then last week. Mailata is 6'8", 346. And I say physical freak. If you ever see his rugby footage of him running, he's probably the fastest 350-pound person I've ever seen in my life. Like, the only people whose athleticism are equivalent to Jordan Mailata at his size are WWE wrestlers. So he's physically gifted. He's a physical freak. But he has basically no NFL experience outside of a few snaps last week. And now you're throwing him in there on Sunday Night Football for the Eagles. Wow. Man, the The Eagles' season continues to be an ebb and flow situation with Jason Peters now. Again, he is out for the next 3 weeks. He's placed on IR. He did get an MRI on his foot, and apparently the MRI revealed that he needed to be put on IR. So he will miss the next 3 weeks. And it looks like, according to reports, Jordan Mailata is going to play left tackle tomorrow. Wow, that's nuts. I can't wait to hear what Billy Schweim has to say about this tomorrow morning in the locker room. Himself, former Eagles player, and Ken Dunnick and Hunter Brody. The locker room with Billy Schweim tomorrow, 10 a.m. to noon, live from All Campus on the OC Boardwalk in Ocean City. Right here on 97.3 ESPN. Then Eagles football. Merrill Reese, Mike Quick on the call. Sunday football coverage begins tomorrow night, 7 p.m. right here on 97.3 ESPN. Also, speaking of the NFC East, your afternoon game for 97.3 ESPN with the Eagles on Sunday football, we have the Cowboys. That's right. We are going to bring you NFC East action on Sunday afternoon. Coverage begins at 12:30 tomorrow. The Cowboys versus the Browns. Dak Prescott versus Baker Mayfield. You have Ezekiel Elliott versus the two-headed running back monster with the Browns with Kareem Hunt, if he's healthy, and Nick Chubb. Interesting game tomorrow. NFC East action, 97.3 ESPN. 609-403-0973 is the text board. We'll get to your text in just a moment. Just want to remind everybody also, by the way, it's being reported now by Derek Gunn as well. So Les Bowen, Derek Gunn, starting to trickle out. More and more Eagle reporters are reporting that it's going to be Jordan Mailata time tomorrow night for the Eagles. Also, if you didn't hear our first hour of the show, thanks again to Reid Fowler from DraftKings, NFL Analyst, for joining us. You have the situation where the Patriots and Chiefs game will not be played tomorrow. Cam Newton tested positive for COVID-19. The Chiefs practice squad quarterback Jordan Ta'amu, he tested positive for COVID-19. So both teams are going through multiple layers of retesting, from the point of contact tracing to the rapid testing. The Patriots will not be able to get their flight today. They were supposed to leave around right now, actually, to fly out to Kansas City, but because of all the retesting and them crossing all their T's and dotting all their I's for this game, they cannot play tomorrow. Adam Schefter has reported that the game is likely to be played Tuesday night due to the double-checking of the COVID-19 issue as well as the travel issue. So, remember last weekend, the Falcons had their own COVID questions. Cornerback A.J. Terrell tested positive. They retested everybody again, and they were good to go to play on Sunday. So, this isn't the first time the NFL has had to deal with this. It's just the first time it's been a big name like Cam Newton. So Cam Newton goes on the COVID-19 reserve list. He probably won't be able to do anything for the next 10 to 14 days for the Patriots. Meanwhile, the Chiefs are double-checking to make sure that they're okay. And as long as there's no issue of multiple people testing positive on the Patriots and Chiefs, they should be good to go for Tuesday night football. That's going to be interesting. As I mentioned earlier as well, the new game at 4:15 tomorrow is Colts-Bears. Frank Reich and Phillip Rivers versus Nick Foles and Matt Nagy are going to be your 4:15 game. How about them apples? By the way, a little COVID-19 good news earlier today was the Vikings, no positive tests. No positive tests at all. So they're clear this morning. They're back to practice. They're good to go to play tomorrow. Titans, meanwhile, they had a couple more positives today. The NFL is basically kind of kicking the can down the lane until they figure out exactly how widespread the Titan situation is. There's all your NFL COVID-19 related updates. PlaySugarHouse.com text board is open, 609-403-0973. Nick from Brigantine says, I would use Jordan Mailata for running back instead of tackle. How about fullback? We don't have any fullbacks in the NFL anymore, Nick from Brigantine. How about you put him at fullback? It'd be like having like a Refrigerator Perry back in the day with the Bears lining up in the backfield, right? Use Mailata as like a fullback, and then he's out there blocking from the full. That's what I would do. Let's go old school. I mentioned the triple option offense earlier, right? Here's what you do. All right. Let's go really nuts tomorrow. Let's put Mailata at fullback, Miles Sanders at running back, Carson Wentz in the shotgun. You run the triple option offense, and he either chucks it to Miles Sanders or Mailata most of the time, and the other guy's blocking. How about them apples? It's not happening, but I can always dream, right? Nick from Brigantine, always appreciate your text. 609-403-0973. PlaySugarHouse.com text board. Texter chimes in and says, Jason Peters is an example of a player simply playing too long. He was an elite borderline Hall of Fame offensive lineman. His body is quitting the game before his mind and his heart, and it's honestly sad. The same thing happened with Peyton Manning. A couple of things I want to address there. Number one, I don't think he's a borderline Hall of Famer. I think he's actually a Hall of Famer, and the reason I say that is because the criteria for the Hall of Fame has been modified, not explicitly, but implicitly, because you look at some of the offensive linemen who have been getting in the Hall of Fame lately, and their credentials are as good, if not lesser, than Jason Peters. And that's not a shot to a guy like a Steve Hutchinson or anyone like that, but I'm not going to sit here and act like a Steve Hutchinson or an Alan Faneca, for as great as their careers were better than Jason Peters. So if they're up for consideration, I genuinely have to think that Jason Peters is definitely a Hall of Famer. You're right about his body quitting on him. And we saw this starting a couple of years ago, when he missed the rest of the season, and it was Halapuli Vaitai was your left tackle in the Super Bowl, and the Eagles won it. He kept having those leg issues with the quad and with the hamstring and with the cramps and the calf. He's had all kinds of leg problems last year, right? And the assumption was if you moved in the right guard, maybe a new position, at least in the short term, could maybe elongate his career. No one was really sure exactly what that would look like. Well, I know what it looks like on left tackle, and he was getting beat really bad on Sunday multiple times. Then this week, like I said, he missed 2 days with an illness, not COVID-related. It was some other thing like a stomach bug. The Eagles never fully specify what it was, but it wasn't COVID-related. We know that for sure. And he comes back in practice. He says his foot's bothering him. He gets an MRI, and now it's a toe injury. So maybe there's something said for the fact that his body's just breaking down. Maybe his body just can't play football anymore. And you're right about Peyton Manning. Listen, Peyton Manning didn't win that last Super Bowl. The Broncos defense carried Peyton Manning's limp arm to a Super Bowl championship. At the end of his career, his arm was just falling off. It's just Peyton Manning couldn't throw the ball at all. I mean, he had a noodle arm. I think there are dudes listening to us right now who had more arm strength in throwing a football than Peyton Manning had in that last year when he won the Super Bowl. So you're 100% right. Peyton Manning's body fell apart way before his body let go. Let's get a couple more texts in here before we hit the break again. Heisman Trophy winner Charlie Ward joining us coming up about 5 minutes from now to talk some college football, talk some ACC football. If Clemson's the best team in the ACC, who's number 2? Is it Miami? I think the Eric King should be the Heisman Trophy frontrunner. We'll see what Charlie Ward thinks coming up about 5 minutes from now. Get a couple more texts in here before we bounce out of here. Hit the break. 609-403-0973. Texter chimes in and says, the NFL will soon follow the same as the NBA with players going into a bubble, or the season will be put on hold because the COVID situation will just only get worse. You will see. Season won't make it, all the games not being shut down. Well, a couple things to address there. Number one, right now the COVID situation is confined to a couple teams. And it's very reminiscent of what we've seen in other sports. Major League Baseball had the problem. Remember, it was just the Marlins and it was just the Cardinals, right? It wasn't a issue across all of baseball. So it had ramifications with the rescheduled games. And baseball is trying to play 60 games. The NFL is trying to play 16. They have contingencies in place to push the playoffs, the Super Bowl down the road. So they have to extend the regular season they can. That was purposely built into the schedule. So I think you're going to see the games all being played. I don't think you'll see the NFL shut down because there's too much money involved. Look at college football. College football has 100 gazillion games today, from the ACC to the SEC. Pac-12 is coming back in November. The Mountain West Conference will come back later this month. The MAC's coming back. Big Ten's coming back. But with all those teams, not every team has a COVID issue. Not every team has all these problems inflicting them. It's Notre Dame, but it's not every team, right, in the ACC. You saw Missouri, they had a bunch of COVID issues, but they're still able to play because other guys can play. COVID didn't spread to the entire team. Look at what happened with Houston. Houston and Baylor were supposed to play, but they had too many COVID cases, so they couldn't play. So while Houston still hasn't played any college football this year, Baylor's playing today versus West Virginia. So don't get too angsty when it comes to this situation, when it comes to the NFL season. There's a reason why the NFL didn't go into a bubble. It just logistically wasn't going to work, they believed. And so far, you only have a handful of teams with any COVID issues. It's not like it's every team in the league. Look at the Eagles. They have 200 guys out with injuries, and none of them are COVID related. So you can play football. You can have a season, and we're going to have a season, but there's just a handful of situations that have to be worked through. That's all. Speaking of college football, Charlie Ward, Heisman Trophy winner, Florida State quarterback, New York Knicks point guard, joins us next here on Sports Bash Saturday on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City.
This is Sports Bash Saturday with Josh Hennig, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Here's Josh Hennig.
PlaySugarHouse.com text word is open at 609-403-0973. Having a lot of fun with you guys chiming in throughout the show. I know there's some of you out there who are like, Josh, do you even give UFC picks anymore? I bet some of you didn't know there was even a UFC fight tonight. I'll get to that later before we get out of here. We have to find out if I actually have a pick or not. It's actually an interesting card tonight, but it's not going to get a lot of attention because there's no big headliners, no big anything going on with it. It's Holly Holm, the former 135-pound women's champion. She's fighting again tonight. Get that a little bit later, about probably 20 minutes from now. 22 minutes from now, we'll touch on the UFC fights. Talking a lot of football news dropping all over the place. Sports Bash Saturday here on 97.3 ESPN. Being brought to you by GMS Law. Make the right call. With 4 convenient locations to serve you. Visit them online at gmslaw.com. Remember I was telling you about this TCU game. Texas just scored again. And this is why I told all of you guys to take the over. Because as soon as these teams stopped having about 200 penalties, they were able to actually play some football. So far, we're up to 14 penalties with 13-10 left in the second quarter. It's a tie game right now, Texas and TCU. So 14 all. So they're on track to hit that over. But the penalties, they might break a record for penalties in this game. I mean, it's been ugly. I mean, helmet-to-helmet hits, just sloppy blocking, grabbing guys' face masks. I mean, it's been a mess, man. Absolute dumpster fire mess. A couple other scores around college football. South Carolina, Florida. Close game, 17-14. That's Will Muschamp versus his old team, the defensive-minded coach. Keeping it competitive. Kyle Trask, another touchdown to Kyle Pitts. Not surprising. No surprise there. But on the other side, remember I told you guys about that Colin Hill? He looks like touchdown Jesus playing football, right? Well, Colin Hill, he has a touchdown pass in this game, but he's not the reason why they're playing well. The running back Kevin Harris, 66 yards already in the game. Florida and South Carolina. Close game. 17-14. Speaking of the SEC, we have an SEC doubleheader today on 97.3 ESPN. Last week, the ACC. This week, we got the SEC for you. Today, Alabama versus Texas A&M, coming up at 3 p.m., followed by Georgia versus Auburn. Coverage begins at 7. So a college football doubleheader today on 97.3 ESPN. I was saying this yesterday on game night. I said, look, it's a beautiful thing, right? You had high school football Friday night, rivalry renewed, St. Joseph's Academy versus Holy Spirit. Friday night high school football. Saturday we have college football doubleheader. Sunday NFL, 2 games. It feels a little bit of normalcy, a little bit of sports to help you escape the rest of the world around you. It's always a healthy thing. Keep an eye also on the SEC. Tennessee with a 21-6 lead over Missouri. I asked Brandon Boykin yesterday on game night on 97.3 ESPN, SEC Network analyst, former Eagles quarterback. I said, is Tennessee real? I don't know what to do with them. Well, Jared Garantano is so far playing well, 10 for 17, throwing with a touchdown. Tennessee leads 21-6 so far from Missouri. That was one of our picks from yesterday. We're keeping an eye on that. Tennessee to cover the spread. By the way, if you missed my conversation with former Eagles quarterback Brandon Boykin, it's up right now, the Game Night podcast at 973ESPN.com, or jump it on the 973 ESPN mobile app. A couple other scores to touch on around college football. A game that might be of interest to people in South Jersey in the ACC, this NC State versus Pitt game. And the reason why you might be interested, NC State has a 17-10 lead right now on the arm of Timber Creek's Devin Leary. That's right. South Jersey's own Devin Leary has 2 touchdown passes in this game, giving NC State a surprising 17-10 lead. NC State got completely ransacked, just destroyed, crushed last week versus Virginia Tech. Now, Devin Leary didn't start that game. He only played the rest of that game. So now he's starting today. And guess what? He's got 2 touchdowns in the game. He's got NC State for a chance for an upset win over Pitt. Meanwhile, the Pittsburgh Panthers starting quarterback is Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett is from Ocean Township. So you got 2 South Jersey quarterbacks going head-to-head in the NC State Pitt game. Right now, that's NC State 17-10 over Pitt right now. Devin Leary, like I said, 2 touchdown passes. Kenny Pickett's got a touchdown pass of his own. So Timber Creek versus Ocean Township going on in the ACC. Of course, PlaySugarHouse.com text board is open, 609-403-0973. Sports Bash Saturday here on 97.3 ESPN. Always keep you updated on the college football games when we're on the air. As I mentioned, TCU, Texas, another game that we're keeping an eye on, 14-all. One of our picks from yesterday, one of our games to watch today. We brought up on game night. Football Fridays on game night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN. We always give you a little preview for the football weekend. A couple other games going on right now. Just give you a little more updates around college football. By the way, Florida extended their lead. Now it's 24-14. It's only a 10-point lead now, though. Kyle Trask had a touchdown pass to who? Oh, yeah, Kyle Pitts. One other game to touch on, Baylor, West Virginia tied 7-7. Interesting game out there because remember, Baylor, they only have 1 game under their belt because they've had a couple games get canceled. West Virginia with 2 games under their belt. So West Virginia a little bit more game experience than Baylor, but Baylor's still a very interesting team to keep an eye on. A bit of a down year for both squads, and that's showing through in this game, 7-7 tie game. Jared Dodge of West Virginia with 2 INTs. That's not a good look. I feel bad for Mike Gill right now. He's a WVU alum, and his quarterback turned the ball over like Carson Wentz. Josh Hennig here, Sports Bash Saturday on 97.3 ESPN. We'll give you a little preview of the NFL slate tomorrow. Again, no Chiefs-Patriots game tomorrow because of COVID-19 issues. So we can't talk about nothing to talk about the Patriots-Chiefs game tomorrow. That's going to look like it's going to be a Tuesday night football game. As I was saying earlier, I wonder if that's going to be a CBS game because CBS was supposed to have that game tomorrow. That was supposed to be the Jim Nantz, Tony Romo national game. So we'll see what goes on with that. Josh Hennig here, Sports Bash Saturday here on 97.3 ESPN. With your text, just more in just about a minute in the show. 609-403-0973 here on Sports Bash Saturday, 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City.
This is Sports Bash Saturday with Josh Hennig, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Here's Josh Hennig.
Sports Bash Saturday. Get back to your text in just a bit. 609-403-0973, the PlaySugarHouse.com text board. But as promised, joining us right now on the World Kind of Hotline, he is the co-host of Bleav in the ACC podcast, Heisman Trophy winner, Florida State quarterback, the one and only Charlie Ward joins us now on 97.3 ESPN. Charlie, how you doing this Saturday?
I'm doing well, sir.
Charlie, I got to ask you because, you know, the college football season has just been absolutely wild, and the ACC is no exception. And, you know, you look around the ACC, I mean, we all know about Clemson, but there's some legit contenders and some really good teams in the ACC this year, from Miami. You know, Pitt right now is losing to NC State. There's a lot of great storylines in the ACC. Is there any one of those storylines that stand out the most to you?
Well, of course, we're still looking at Miami, who has, impressed after the first game. You know, there are next two games, Louisville and Florida State. You know, they've played really, really well. And so they've kind of thrusted themselves in that upper echelon. And, of course, we're still waiting on North Carolina to play. They haven't played in a couple of weeks. And so hopefully, you know, they're a team that can also be thrown in that mix. Pitt, of course, right now I think they're losing to NC State at home. And so it'll be interesting to see how they fight themselves out. They've had some offensive struggles. They really hadn't put up a lot of points, but defensively they've been pretty stout. So it'll be interesting to see how they continue to move forward. And then Notre Dame, you know, on top of that, they've been out for a few weeks as well. And I think their next game is Florida State at home. So it'll be interesting to see how all these teams be able to navigate through this season, you know, with them not really having a set schedule. Because, you know, in the past you knew you were going to play each and every week. But now you don't know if you're going to play, you know, from week to week. And so hopefully they can get back on the field and at least show that they're capable of competing with Clemson. Virginia Tech, where they were missing like 23 players, like maybe 5 coaches in their first game, and so we'll see how they're going to respond and play when those guys return.
You mentioned Miami. We've had a couple of Miami games here on 97.3 ESPN recently, and you know, for me, I look at D'Eriq King, and I mean, this guy is incredible. You know, I mean, to me, I think he should be the Heisman Trophy frontrunner. Everyone talks about Trevor Lawrence, but to me, what I think D'Eriq is just arguably one of the most valuable players in college football. Tell the folks a little bit more about D'Eriq King down at Miami.
Well, I had the pleasure of being able to coach him his freshman year in high school. And he was the quarterback, and he was my only lone success in football. It was the only year I made the playoffs. But he's a special talent. He's a great leader, and guys follow him. It's been that way since Little League, and he's done a great job at University of Miami, coming in and helping to resurrect their swagger. He's making great decisions. That's what he's been doing, you know, as long as I know. And, you know, he's done a great job of doing the necessary things to help his team win. But the offense fits him well. He's accustomed to that type of style when he played at the University of Houston. But I'm just happy for him because he's a good guy from a great family. And I'm just happy to see him doing well.
when I've watched him, and I'm not a former quarterback. I played safety when I was younger, but as a quarterback, he reminds me a little bit of Kyler Murray. He seems to have those similar skill sets. Does he remind you of anybody?
That's a good comparison. If you're going to compare someone, he does have that similar type skill set. And, the one thing that I think they kind of both have in common is, they're playmakers. But when it's all said and done, whenever they get the ball in their hands, that they're going to make good decisions for the most part. That's kind of what you want as a when you have a quarterback. You want someone that you feel confident that they're going to make good decisions 95% of the time, and you just trust that they're going to do it. And that's where I treat quarterbacks. You think about the Tom Brady's, the Russell Wilsons, those guys who and you trust, and it's like, man, every time they get it, something good happens.
Charlie Ward joining us here on the Boardwalk on the hotline on 97.3 ESPN, the co-host of the Bleav in the ACC podcast, dropping each and every week on the Bleav Podcasting Network. Also, you can follow Charlie on Twitter at @RealCharlieWard. Charlie, you're a Heisman Trophy winner. You played quarterback at Florida State. You were, one of the more prolific quarterbacks during your era. I always wanted to ask someone like you, do you think that your style of play could have been even better and greater in today's football? Because we're seeing a lot of guys with your similar skill sets that you had at Florida State, even playing in the NFL now.
I guess you could say that the skill set of the players are being recognized. I think the NFL has kind of changed their thought process on, the style of offense and the type of player that can play that position. And so that's just a trend, of our times. Of course, it's been about almost 26 years now since I've been out of college, and, times have changed. The players have changed. Smaller guys play within, a system that they can thrive in and, get opportunities.
Speaking of Florida State, I got to ask you, what is going on with your alma mater? Because, I think a lot of people at first felt like maybe there were some issues when it came to recruiting. Obviously, they haven't had many great offensive linemen down there. Is it just a recruiting issue, or is it also because of the constant changing of head coaches, the fact that there's been too much maybe turnover at the top of the program?
Well, that normally plays a big part in recruiting and all the other things. Because when you have instability, this is in the organization. I don't care what it is. If you have instability, from the top down, and constant voice from a, changing of the culture program, you're not going to have great success. And so you can try to sugarcoat it as much as you want. It definitely starts with just having some great stability and leadership. Guys that can, coaches that, or a head coach that people want to follow. And, I think, we've had to go through, normally when you have a legendary coach who's been around for some time, you struggle to find consistency after that coach. And ours was, Coach Jimbo was in-house when he took the job. And so that kind of helped with the transition. And then when he started making the decision to, probably leave, then, that's what started the carousel. And we just, I think now we have a coach that everyone is willing to support. And he's, I think he will be the guy to be able to help us get back to playing solid football and being the type of, school and team that we've been accustomed to in the past. I think we've recruited well. Of course, sometimes guys through the mix get, outcast because of new new coaches and all those different things. And so I think that's where we are. We're just kind of in a rebuilding, starting over type mode. And I think we have some young players that can help us, with some veterans as well that's still here to just, help through this transition.
He's Charlie Ward. Make sure you check out the Bleav in the ACC podcast. I've been listening, Charlie. It's a lot of fun to listen to you and your co-host, Lloyd Spence. Check it out every week on the Bleav Podcasting Network. Charlie Ward, you can follow on Twitter at @RealCharlieWard. Heisman Trophy winner, Florida State quarterback, and as all guests, he appeared here on the Boardwalk, Honda Heartline. Charlie, really appreciate the time and hope you get to have a great weekend, and hopefully Florida State turns it around sooner than later.
I hope so as well. I hope it starts today.
Thanks again, Charlie. Appreciate the time.
All right, y'all have a good one.
Josh Hennig here, Sports Bash Saturday here on 97.3 ESPN. A conversation with Charlie Ward there, the Heisman Trophy winner, being brought to you by GMS Law. Make the right call. With 4 convenient locations to serve you, you can visit them online at gmslaw.com. Sports Bash Saturday here on 97.3 ESPN. Speaking of Miami, I know that we may be able to be bringing you that Miami-Clemson game next week. That's a huge game. We're listening to the Bleav Podcasting Network, Bleav in the ACC podcast with Charlie Ward and his co-host Lloyd Spence. Talk some more about that game, previewing it this week. Again, it's the Bleav in the ACC podcast, BLEAV, Bleav in the ACC podcast. Charlie Ward and Lloyd Spence on that. A little Eagles news to hit you up with. It just came down as well. The Eagles have made several roster moves as a result. It's not just Jason Peters going to IR now. It's Trevor Williams also going to IR. So as a result, they've had to make a bunch of roster moves. They've signed Travis Fulgham, Luke Juriga, and Adrian Killins. They've all been signed to the active roster from the practice squad. They've also elevated cornerback Grayland Arnold and Deontay Burnett from the practice squad. So just give you a little rundown here. So Travis Fulgham and Deontay Burnett were catching a lot of passes from Carson Wentz this week at practice. So they've already been working with the starting quarterback on the first-team offense this week. So this was kind of a formality to bring them up. Trevor Williams was already ruled out. Him going to IR, which means he's going to miss the next 3 weeks. You might be asking, who the heck is Grayland Arnold? Well, Grayland Arnold was a cornerback at Baylor. He played under Matt Rule down there at Baylor for a few years. Just a reference point. He had 6 interceptions last year. He was one of the top interception men in all of college football in 2019. 6 interceptions along with 32 solo tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss. So he's a willing tackler. He's a guy who can get interceptions. He's about the same size as Devontae Maddox. He's about 5'10", 5'11". So he's not a big receiver, but he's an active receiver, and he has some big-time college football experience. Remember, in the Big 12, they threw the ball around a lot. So a lot of passing, a lot of things going on down there with that ball game. So Big 12 football, always, interesting to watch what defensive players come out of there. And the Eagles, looks like they might have got a defensive player out of there. Grayland Arnold is going to be one of your cornerbacks tomorrow night. Your receivers, looks like it's going to be Deontay Burnett along with Travis Fulgham, John Hightower, the rookie, and Greg Ward. As I mentioned, the Eagles, because of all the openings on the roster due to placing Jason Peters and Trevor Williams on IR, they have brought up Travis Fulgham, the receiver, Deontay Burnett, Adrian Killins. Remember, now Killins is a guy that's very interesting. Get to him in a sec, as well as Luke Juriga. Adrian Killins, he's a guy that, if you've been listening to Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, Andrew DeCecco has talked a lot about Adrian Killins. He's written about him at 973ESPN.com. Adrian Killins is one of these speed backs, right? He's one of these guys who can go out there and really just rip it up in the open field. And he's a kick and punt return guy. For those who don't know, he's from UCF. So he's one of these guys who was playing on that team that went undefeated a couple of years ago and declared themselves national champions, right? He's a dual threat back. He can run the ball. He can catch the ball. Not a big guy. He's roughly about 5'8", so he's about Darren Sproles' height. But really where his value is, he can kick and punt return. He's a guy who had a lot of kick return yards in college, including a kickoff return for a touchdown. So you have to wonder, is he just being brought up because he's a running back, or is he going to maybe get some work on special teams because we know he can do that? So interesting moves for the Eagles today. Again, Jason Peters, Trevor Williams to the IR. They've promoted Grayland Arnold, the cornerback from Baylor, along with Deontay Burnett for the practice squad. Travis Fulgham, Luke Juriga, the center, along with Adrian Killins, the running back, all signed to the active roster. So the Eagles doing a lot of shuffling, a lot of readjusting on the fly to get ready for Sunday night football. No Jason Peters. Reports are that Jordan Mailata will start at left tackle. So the former rugby player is going to play at left tackle. The expectation is that your starting quarterbacks tomorrow night are going to be Darius Slay, Nickel Roby-Coleman, and Crevan LeBlanc, and then Grayland Arnold will be your primary backup for those three guys. So a lot of moving parts, a lot of Eagles news, a lot of football news in general today. Busy show today here on 97.3 ESPN. PlaySugarHouse.com text board is open, 609-403-0973. Dan from EHT asks, what's your score prediction for the Eagles game tomorrow? Well, listen, Dan, I gave the score earlier on the locker room with Billy Schweim because he asked me, and I obliged him because Schweim's a good guy. He asked me, and I gave him an answer. And I'll give it again right here because all the moves that have just happened today with the Eagles injuries, the 49ers injuries, the IR, I'm not changing my score. I feel actually more confident in my score than ever. I think the Eagles can win tomorrow. I think this is the Eagles' last chance to win for the next couple weeks. They got to win. They're playing a 49ers defense that's missing three big pieces along the defensive line. Nick Bosa out for the year. We know they're missing other guys like Solomon Thomas as well. They've already ruled out Jimmy Garoppolo. They ruled out Raheem Mostert. They already have two cornerbacks not playing tomorrow like the Eagles. They're thin in the secondary. They're thin on the defensive line. I think the Eagles, if they can't score this week, they're never going to score. If they can score 23 points with the Bengals last week, they should be able to at least do something similar like that this week. I think this is a 20-16 Eagles win. I think the Eagles are going to keep it close. I don't think the 49ers have enough bodies on the defense to really stop even the Eagles who are shorthanded, because the Eagles still have Miles Sanders. They still have Zach Ertz. And I expect the Eagles to be creative tomorrow. Expect an offense like we saw back in December when Carson Wentz was also throwing a Deontay Burnett. Greg Ward might be a huge fantasy DFS guy to pick up this week for the Eagles. He's basically your number one receiver this week. So I'm going 2016 Eagles. I think the Eagles, this is the last time they have a chance to win for a couple weeks because they got the Steelers next week coming off of that unexpected bye, and then they're going to play the Ravens the week after that. So if you don't win this game, you're not winning until at least the end of the month, in my opinion. So I'm going Eagles 2016 tomorrow. Fingers crossed, hoping for the best. Sports Bash Saturday here on 97.3 ESPN. I promised you I'd let you know about the UFC fights tonight. It's going to be over there on the ESPN Plus because of all the college football games going on around college football. It's Holm versus Irene Aldana. It's a great old guard versus new guard. Aldana is a very young, up-and-coming fighter. Holm is still one of the best women's fighters in the game, but she's getting a little older. She's not as young as she used to be. Co-main event is probably going to be a knockout. That's Jorgan De Castro versus Carlos Felipe. I mentioned it might be a knockout because if you go to your trusty DraftKings Sportsbook app or on PlaySugarHouse.com, you'll notice that if you say this fight is going to finish, just how it's going to win. Not who's going to win, how it's going to end in general. Some good odds there. Winning method by knockout, TKO, or disqualification. Either fighter. If you think the fight is going to go a certain way, there's some real value there. But some interesting fights today on the UFC card for those who always tune in and want to hear what I have to say about that. The big cards coming in the next couple of weeks, like Khabib versus Justin Gaethje. So those fights are still coming down the road, but not this weekend. This weekend, I'm focused a little more on the college football and the NFL. Of course, tomorrow, the NFL games. Some interesting games. Remember, no Chiefs Patriots tonight. You want to get those Chiefs and Patriots out of your fantasy football lineups. Don't put your bets down. That Bears Colts game is moving to 4:15. So you got Nick Foles versus Frank Reich leading you into Eagles football tomorrow night on televisions. Don't forget, coming up later this afternoon, we got a SEC doubleheader, Alabama versus Texas A&M, right here on 97.3 ESPN. Coverage begins at 3 o'clock, followed by the oldest rivalry in the South. SEC matchup, Georgia-Auburn, 7 o'clock. Tonight is the coverage here on 97.3 ESPN. Tomorrow we have Cowboys versus Browns. Coverage begins at 12:30. Don't forget, Billy Schweiman in the locker room live from all campus on the Ocean State Boardwalk himself, Ken Dunnick and Hunter Brody on the call tomorrow for the locker room, 10 a.m. to noon on 97.3 ESPN. I'm Josh Hennig. I'll be back on Monday for game night at 6 p.m. here on 97.3 ESPN.